when it becomes available. But right now we actually have Councilman John Delgado here, and he's also running for mayor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I wish it were under different circumstances.
And when you heard the news, obviously you were very vocal about the shootings that have happened here in Baton Rouge. When you heard this news this morning, what was your first reaction?
Shock. I think everyone's first reaction would be shock. It was about 9 o'clock this morning. The shooting occurred about 8:50, so 10 minutes into it. It was still an active crime scene, and we rushed over to the mayor's office of Homeland Security to be briefed and to find out what was going on. It's a very frightening situation. Never seen anything like that in Baton Rouge. I've lived here 41 years, and I'm still in a little bit of shock about it.
Well, and people are, we talk about the Baton Rouge is home,
yeah,
for us, but it's reverberating all throughout the country. This whole violence outbreak and this high temperature and this conflict between authority and people of the community. What can we do to turn that temperature down, John?
Well, I mean, I think we solve this problem by talking, by communicating, by sitting down at the table. But we have to show respect for law enforcement. These guys put their lives on the line every day. 3 of them have lost their lives today. And we have to convince people in our community that the answer is not to disrespect law enforcement. The answer is not to take the law into your own hands. Law enforcement, those are the people that keep us safe. And now we have to make sure that we keep them safe. I think that what's happened today is just a tragedy that's really beyond words.
Well, and the irony of the whole thing is what we saw in Dallas back on July 7th. 5 officers' lives were taken, and they were shot in the process of trying to help people that were peacefully protesting.
Right, and again, those were officers that when the shots were fired, the people that were protesting the officers ran to the officers for help. And that is ironic, but that's something that we see every day. You can curse the police, you can be mad at them for giving you a ticket, but at the end of the day, when you need their help, they're there for you. And we have to remember that. And we talk about people coming in to Baton Rouge with all these protests. I think it is time for these protests to end, and I think that if you are here in Baton Rouge merely to cause harm, merely to get your face on TV, if you're one of these paid protesters, these professional Facebook warriors, get the hell out of my city. We're done with you. We don't need you in Baton Rouge anymore. You've caused enough harm. And they do exist. Don't kid yourself. There are people who make their living by causing all these difficulties.
And John, what do you think the community needs right now? Because I know that you were one who sent your condolences to the Sterling's family. What do you think we need right now?
I think every community leader needs to condemn this attack without hesitation. There is no justification for this. There is no background, there's no perspective that you can say could have caused this, might have caused it. No, forget it. There's no justification for this. Everyone must condemn this attack, and then we can come together and talk about how we fix our city as citizens of Baton Rouge together.
And an interesting twist, and you mentioned the outsider. We don't know anything about the shooter that was taken down. We don't know if that's a person from here. We don't know if there were mental issues involved. We have none of that information. But you did talk about outside influences. We've seen it here. I was in Atlanta last week. We saw it there where people were coming in from the outside trying to get people to block off the expressways and the freeways where people have to go to work and where emergency vehicles have to get
That's the best way to get your picture on TV. That's the best way to have a Facebook post that gets 1,000 likes, and that's what their goal is. The goal of these paid protesters, of these people that come in to cities that are experiencing the types of situations that we have, is they are trying to aggrandize themselves by getting arrested, by causing trouble. And that's exactly what we do not need. We do not need professional troublemakers coming into Baton Rouge.
And what it doesn't do is it doesn't solve the problem that took Alton Sterling's life in the first place, or these police officers today, or the Philando, or any of these other folks.
No, these people are in it for themselves.
Yeah.
And everybody's been calling for peace. And, last time, like I said, we saw protesters yesterday, and it was all peaceful. And then this morning, we get, the news that 3 officers were shot. And the officers last night were actually trying to talk to the protesters. What kind of dialogue do you think needs to be made in our city?
Well, I think, we were healing. We were in the healing process. My wife and I went out last night, and I remarked about how, wow, so many people are out now. It looks like the city's come back together. You know, we can finally move forward. And so I think, you know, as hard as it's going to be, and as difficult as it's going to be for our police department to get past this incident, we are all going to have to keep walking hand in hand together.
Yeah, they're going to need us to hug their neck the way they've been hugging ours this entire time. You know, as an elected official, your advice, your plea to other elected officials out there as to what they need to do now?
I think that for the elected officials that have been participating in these protests and that have been out there, they need to call for calm and say no more protests. We are done having these protests. It is now time for the dialogue. It is now time for us to sit down and work through our differences. And I understand those differences exist. Don't get me wrong. There are divides in our community. But it is well past time for these protests to end. They are now putting people's lives at risk. They are now putting police officers' lives at risk. It is time for those protests to stop, and it's time for us to sit down at the table and come up with a solution that works for all of our community.
All right, John Delgado, thank you so much for stopping by. We really appreciate your input, and you have our prayers as a community leader.
Thank you.
You've got some work to do out there.
We all need them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you, John.